Okay, so I think yeah, we started recording now, I think, and it's over to me, Caroline Stockmann from the Association of Corporate Treasurers, to welcome you all to this session. We have our inaugural ACT Treasury peer review having been carried out over the last few months with the support of Deutsche Bank, where we've talked to 200 multinationals about a whole range of Treasury topics. So today we'd like to talk briefly about that review, as well as in general best practice in Treasury. There's an accompanying guide to the review, which takes case studies and thought leadership from different sources. And you can access that from today. And I think Sophie will be putting that link into the chat function. So if you want to check the chat function in a moment or two, I know we had it there this morning, but we've got it as she's already done it all. So there's a little message to you to remind you that the session is being recorded, and the website page, you can see there the best practice guide that you can access. And for those of you who participated in the review, your personalised report is being finalised and sent out this week, so you may have already just received it or maybe about to receive it. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guests today. We have Neil and Claudia with us, and you know their bios a little from the invitation, but I'm going to ask them if they would each give a brief introduction to themselves, as well as including something that you may not know about them, because with this kind of virtual event, it's nice to have a bit of the human side of things. So if I could ask you to introduce yourselves, maybe Claudia, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Caroline. So my name is Claudia Villasis-Wallraff. I have 15 years of experience working across various different industries. I worked in consulting and corporate treasury from some multinationals in Germany and in the UK, technology companies, and last but not least at Deutsche Bank. In Deutsche Bank, I am the head of Treasury Advisory Asia Pacific. So my team provides treasury advice to corporate clients relevant for treasury transformation or business transformation topics. So something personal about me. So I just came back from Germany yesterday, a very long holiday. So my passion is skiing and hiking, and being in Singapore, I had missed that so much in the last 2 years. But the cold was terrible. So at 11 degrees, I was freezing, and my son who is 4 years old, he was starting to go on a strike. He didn't want to go out anymore. So happy to be back home.
Very good, thanks, Claudia. And then over to you, Neil.
Yeah, hi. Afternoon, good morning if you're the other side of the world. Yeah, Neil Wadey. I'm Group Treasurer at BAT. I've been I suppose a treasurer for about 20 years and running the BAT Treasury function for the last 6 or 7. I'm a mathematician by background, so I have to fight against the analytical part of me to bring out some of the other skills of a treasurer, and we'll perhaps talk about that later. Something specific about me. Well, I'm an empty nester. My 2 daughters away at university, so that defines that we need to get into a smaller house quite quickly. But personal interests, I was talking this morning, very much my passion for European free improvisation, which is a kind of very niche part of music. And the thing I like to play that on is Great British hi-fi. So I collect hi-fi from the 1980s up to the present day, and I'm currently recreating the hi-fi system I had at university, which was, what, 35 years ago now. So that's me.
Fascinating. We'll have to have a further talk later, because I don't know if you know, but I'm a trained musician from the past. So we probably have lots more to talk about on a further call. And I'm going to stay with you, Neil, for my first question. But if I could just remind those who've joined, if you've got a visual on, can you turn your camera off, even if it's showing a blank square, because then we can see our panelists more clearly. So for whoever hasn't noted that, please make sure everyone's on mute and turn off your camera if you can, or your picture or whatever it is that's showing at the moment from somebody. Yeah, so Neil, why is benchmarking important? And given the diversity of different treasury roles, different companies, etc., is it of value?
Well, I think it's fundamental to keep us agile, looking forward, keeping up with best practice. Not everybody will get the same thing out of benchmarking, and we can wrap benchmarking up in something quite formal, but for me it can also be informal conversations. I'm always benchmarking, thinking about what my structures should look like, what technology I should use, how I should deal with a particular problem. So I'm not too hung up on the word, but the process I think is fundamental. And if you think you've finished in Treasury and it's all done, I think that's a big mistake. I think there's always something to look forward to at the individual, the organization level, the technology level. So absolutely, I think wherever you sit, whatever viewpoint you have, benchmarking, whatever you want to describe it as, is pretty fundamental in my mind.
Thanks, Neil. And Claudia, from your perspective, obviously Deutsche Bank supported this whole initiative. So where were you coming from? What was the bank's view of why this is so important?
So we get asked all the time by our clients, so what are my peers doing? So which technology are they adopting? So this was a way to formalize with what others would say, and we are very happy to have done it with the Association of Corporate Treasurers, of course. So part of the questions is always, what are my peers doing? So sometimes it's, what is my competition doing? Sometimes I suggest our clients to keep in mind is that your peers are not only the ones in the same industry, but companies with the same characteristics, maybe with the same footprint, large operations in Asia, large operations in Europe. What are they doing? Are they cash rich? Are they highly leveraged? Are they considered very sophisticated or innovative? So what are these companies doing? That's the second step when reading these benchmarks.
Indeed, and it is interesting within Treasury, it's not, they are transferable skills, and often you'll find somebody that you can compare against that's not the same industry, but they've got more in common with you potentially than somebody in that same industry. Centralization of the Treasury function is a matter of debate, and we talk about it in the review outputs and in the guide. As we said, organizations are coming from different starting points, they've got different cultures, they've got different history, etc. But our results show that 42% of our 200 participants, all multinationals, as you know, have a centralized treasury function, with 55% having a partly centralized treasury function. 41% are levering the efficiencies of a shared service center, and 69% have in-house banks in place. So I know, Neil, you've put a lot of thought into the design of BAT's treasury function and getting the balance right between those different elements. I wonder if you could run us through some of the key factors you considered when you were building your model, if you like, and why you chose what it is that you have today.
Okay, let me just quickly give you a bit of kind of history. So going back to the early noughties, that's when I joined Treasury. BAT had a very policy-driven Treasury, and what I mean by a policy-driven Treasury is one where there's a strong policy which you send out, and once a quarter you say to 180 markets around the world, have you done it? And they send back and say yes, or somehow, or part of it, and lots of questions come from that. So it's not very effective. It's very slow, and it's quite frustrating. So we very much piggybacked on an overall reconstruction of our IT landscape around 2010, and that was moving from I think it was 63 global instances of SAP the company had, and we decided to move to one. And Treasury basically said this is a great opportunity for us, so we can get visibility, we can have common processes, we can centralize some of those processes in one location. So rather than doing the same thing in Brazil and Russia and Papua New Guinea and Australia and South Africa, we could pick a location and get really good at it in one place. So we decided shared services and centralization was part of the mix. And we also decided that expertise was part of the mix. So we went to very much an information-driven Treasury. It was unapologetically centralized. That was very much against the historic BAT way, but it was unapologetically centralized, and we used the system to drive that centralization. And we effectively had, or still have, specialists driving activities where we want to get to in a certain area, and also on business partnering, and they're generally sitting in London, and then we have a shared service which does report to me rather than to shared services, but that's just a choice. They're very aligned with our general shared services, and they do actually not just normal processes, they go quite wide. So they go as far as FX and derivative trading. They do all our accounting, they do our daily cash positioning, they do control, settlements, etc., etc. So that's quite wide. But the key, I think, having set that up, was the information. So we all drive off the same information. I think that is fundamental to that structure, and we all have the same kind of KPIs, to use KPIs and as an acronym. So we all know what we're trying to achieve, and we're all using the same data to achieve it. And I think that's pretty fundamental. And it's empowered to do that. The organisation is very flat, and people are empowered, whether they're sitting in Romania in shared services or London in the more specialist areas. They're all empowered to get on with their area within the confines of the annual kind of objectives that we set, which obviously are always moving forward. So very dynamic in the sense of linking with the business. And I think, as to close, I'd just say the link to the business, both up and down, is crucial in that organisation. So we're very much not about being a silo. We're very much about being part of the business and driving both the strategy and the operations of the business. I think I'll stop there. So those are the kind of key elements that we brought to our organisation design. We're pretty mature now. It's been there 10 years or so in that broad format.
Well, thanks for that, Neil. And well, as you know, for our audience, I visited your shared service centre a few years back now, and it was absolutely fascinating. They're great people. It was really interesting to see how it all worked. But Claudia, you've worked as a treasurer. You're in Treasury consultancy now with Deutsche Bank. So you're seeing what clients are doing. You get quite a wide perspective. What would you say are some of the key factors in terms of organisational design that you feel are important? And what's your view of a successful shared service centre? Or do you have any reservations about that kind of a model?
So I think I will echo what Neil mentioned. So organizational structures involves technology. It involves how your policy is managed. So nowadays, centralization doesn't mean having all the people in the same place. It is just having the control over what those people are doing and that they are following the same policy. And so what we have seen in the market is that the centralization concept is also is going into empowering perhaps the shared service centers as, and they are playing a larger role. So even very well-established companies that were highly centralized in the past are starting to ask us where it's the best place to open a shared service center. So here in Asia, Malaysia is getting in a better place. So compared to the traditional Philippines and India, something that is also changing is that the shared service centers are being empowered. So before they used to do the more operational basic tasks, and now they are absorbing some of the cognitive tasks and sometimes some strategic ones. So, and they are moving from being an operational place to do the payments into having the responsibility over some FX trading, some other roles that were more typical for a headquarters. So I would say they are becoming a center of excellence. The operational tasks are moving towards, in the more sophisticated companies, are being moved to robotics, RPAs. So having said that, one movement that we have seen as well is that now centralization is also about breaking corporate silos. So instead of treasury or accounting having some people in the shared service center, now we are seeing that companies are moving whole processes. So like source to pay, where procurement, accounting, finance, and then at the end treasury would play a role, or perhaps recruit to retire, which is those are the two obvious examples for some companies.
Thanks very much. That's really helpful. Just for the sake of time, I'd like to move on to a new topic, if I may. Virtual accounts. It's something which we've talked about in the peer review, and for many of our treasurers, it's a bit of a mysterious area. They're always keen to learn about it, but maybe haven't been involved so much themselves. So Claudia, if I could stay with you and ask you if you could clarify what's meant by the term, just in case people aren't familiar, and what value such accounts can add to a treasury's strategy.
Thank you. So a physical account is what you usually have, everybody has at a bank. So that's where the money comes in and comes out. You can hang into this physical bank account, virtual accounts, which means they just have a different number, but the transactions would go into this physical account. So maybe I explain it with an example. That's the easiest way. The typical use case is for reconciliation purposes. So you have one physical account, but what you give to your clients is it's a bank account number with an identifier that with some banks you can select yourself. It can be maybe for insurance your policy number, or it can be the invoice number for some other types of business. So as a treasurer, you can decide which kinds of reference number you want to have when you give this to your clients. The client doesn't notice or doesn't need to know or doesn't care if it is a virtual account or a physical account. It just, when the payment comes in, it will be credited or debited into the right physical account. And you can create your own structure for reporting purposes. They don't have a cost. You don't need to do a KYC when you open it, so it goes very handy, very fast over the bank portals. So and you can design it yourself. You can have as many as you want. And some of our clients where jurisdictions allow it, they are even using them for in-house bank, as the virtual accounts can also actually release payments and receive collections. Then you don't need to open a bank account, a physical bank account for each of your entities. You can have one physical bank account for all of your entities in Europe, and everything else can be a virtual account. The benefits, just to summarize, is that they are much easier for reporting, and you don't need to perform cash pool activities at the end of the day.
Very good. Thanks, Claudia. That's really helpful. So I hope that's helpful to the audience as well, to give a bit of background. But I'll move over to Neil now. You've been pushing this kind of technology for some years now. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience of it?
Yeah, I guess we tend to look at our cash management kind of continent by continent. And I suppose about 5 years ago, we were looking at this kind of technology across Europe. with the kind of whole SEPA environment kind of coming in, and also to a certain extent across Asia. And we wanted to put two things together, one where we could the POBO robo, so payments on behalf and receivables on behalf type structures, along with virtual accounts. So in Europe, as Claudia was talking about, we very much run off as near as possible one real bank account in euros across Europe. But that has virtual accounts for specific companies, and it really crosses borders. So it's not just a domestic tool; it's a cross-continent tool. In other locations where we've got real receivable reconciliation challenges, and there's a number of ways to try and look at this, but we found virtual accounts pretty helpful here. So where we've got a large number of customers, I think of one relatively recent implementation we were doing where we've got something like 30,000 customers. They've all got a virtual account hanging off the header account, and it's used to effectively allocate the cash as it comes in. That means it's quicker to be allocated, means we can sell more to those customers. So I think it's very agile, very quick, KYC reduced, accounting's easier, maintenance costs are reduced. It has lots of benefits. Just need to be careful of some jurisdictions, have a little bit more kind of control around this type of technology. So you just need to make sure it's okay in the location you are. But I certainly think it's something worth looking at.
Oh, really interesting. Lots of benefits there. So thank you very much, Neil. Technology, looking at technology further, maybe, we know there's so many opportunities out there as we see the numbers of fintechs springing up, the number of different things going on out there. But we often feel that our treasurers are quite risk averse. So I think you're going to maybe contradict me soon, Neil, on that one. But in terms of more of the basics, the review found that there was a lower than expected, to my mind, from what I hear from my Treasury contacts, interest in having a robust Treasury management system, with 26% of multinationals still using spreadsheets to do the job, while visibility of cash was something people had really focused on. So 71% were saying that they had automated visibility of cash for 65% and over of or more of their balances. And when it came to applying newer technologies such as APIs, automated program interfaces, the responses were again rather low in terms of level of interest and or use. But what are your thoughts on where treasurers are on this? And maybe with you first, Neil, to talk about your own experience, and then what you see going on amongst your peers, and then Claudia, maybe what you see amongst your clients.
Yeah, I do wonder whether we've got a definitional issue going on here. I think, going back to my own Treasury design, when I talked about visibility, standardization, speed of data, etc., as all being very important. So whatever the tool that gives me that, as far as I'm concerned, that is a treasury management system. That can be very much integrated to your ERP. It may be that you've got multiple ERPs and you wrap it over the top. And, at the simplest, maybe it is a spreadsheet, but I think spreadsheets will have their limitations. They are things that, it's difficult to make sure the controls around them are appropriate. Certainly, as we went into COVID, the flexibility to move locations and manage from different locations with them is much more limited. Today, I'm doing my BCP on Romania. So today, Romania doesn't exist, and I'm managing the whole of our treasury function from another location. I don't think that's possible with spreadsheets. So I think when people really get into the guts, they probably do have something that's closer to a treasury management system. But does it have to be something that necessarily does all the analytics, does everything that you would say the high grade TMSs do. Not necessarily, but does it need to provide basic data in a consistent way that you can kind of move and act on quickly? I think that's pretty fundamental. And the last thing I would say is, if anybody's out there kind of being a bit reticent about asking for resources to implement systems, I think going back to treasurers are risk averse. I think treasurers should be appropriate risk takers. I think that's our role, not to just be risk averse. We should take appropriate risks. And also, when we look at information, when I remember setting up Treasury service centres in Asia, and we said the benefit's going to be X, it was always 5, 10, 50 times that benefit. The visibility you get is immense, and what you can do with things when you know the issues is immense. So I'd really encourage people to kind of step into that space. But it may be that they have something that really is a system, but they don't call it that for whatever reason.
Absolutely. That's one of the issues with these surveys. Often or reviews, if you like, benchmarking reviews, they often open more questions, but then that gives us lots more to talk about, doesn't it? So moving over to Claudia then, what have you been seeing amongst your clients? Oh, you're on mute, Claudia.
Sorry, I was very surprised by the response. I didn't expect that still so many people were working in Excel. But Excel sheets, that's I think every treasury in the world are still using, and they're very difficult. It's very difficult to get rid of it. So the problem is that the world is moving at a very fast pace. So if you think about immediate payments, business transformation going into e-commerce platforms, so the speed at which a treasury needs to react today, cryptos, blockchain. So it is just a matter of a few years where treasurers will need to leapfrog if they don't have at least a basic infrastructure. So as Neil mentioned, it doesn't need to be one of the super customizable treasury management systems, but what you should have is access to information, and a quick access to information. So I got very scared by more than half of the respondents said that they are still downloading account statements from bank portals. So that I understand, because there are some geographies where the bank connectivity is difficult, but that means that maybe you have a full visibility of your cash 3 days too late. So if you put a business case and take the risk and are willing to invest some years on investing in technology, I'm sure that just by getting rid of all the inefficiencies in liquidity management, by having the full cash visibility, you would be in a much better place. And another aspect that it's important to consider, so if you don't have the data, if you don't have the technology, then sometimes you are not even able to use the latest developments in bank products, because you need a system to consume those products. So it seems as don't touch a working system. Excel is a great tool. I love it. But there are many technology developments that could make your department more efficient and focus on more strategic topics instead of doing reporting in Excel.
Absolutely. Makes the job much more interesting, doesn't it? Just before we go to the kind of final area of questions that I've got for you, just to remind people that in the chat box, if you've not seen it yet, there is a link to the guide, and also the chat box is where you can pose any questions for the panel, because we'll be leaving some time for questions shortly. Yes, the next topic I wanted to look at, all of the topics we've covered so far come up in the best practice guide and in the outcomes from the peer review. But we also talk about people and culture there, and specifically looking at how we create a culture of personal development. Our Business of Treasury research in 2021 showed us that in terms of the biggest barrier to career progression, our treasurers said that was around the what people often call the softer skills. We call the business or behavioural skills of strategic influencing, communication, relationship building, etc. And it's a key area for them in their development, and it's also particularly pertinent for people as they progress through their careers. They find that it becomes more of a barrier if they're not as developed, shall we say, in those particular skills. How important do you feel those skills are, for your Treasury team, and what do treasurers need to do about it? And I'll start first of all with Neil on this one, please.
Thanks, Caroline. Look, I think it's fundamental. I think I've used fundamental quite a lot this afternoon, but fundamental. Storytelling is really what engages the company, your partners in delivering your vision. So if a treasurer is setting a vision or an objective, you've got to sell it. And whilst there is a place for people to be deeply technical, that's understood. To get things done, you actually need to bring people with you, and whether that's bringing the board with you on a strategic issue, or the procure to pay people with you on your payment methods, or whether you're looking at why you should do your virtual accounts, as we've been discussing, or how you develop your e-commerce platforms and make sure that they are fit for purpose across multiple jurisdictions. You've got to be able to engage people and bring them with you. And so the technical skills are a given. I know that's a bit of a cliche, but it is. They are a given. You have to go further. And I think it's a journey that some comes with experience. Some people are very natural at this stuff. Other people need to work at it more. I find it the hardest thing in my Treasury career was building that skill to engage people, to actually push through and not just sell the technical, but to sell the vision as well. So I think this is fundamental, and I spend probably 30–40% of my time mentoring my team, painting the picture for the organization about where we're going, coaching certain other individuals, coaching across into other parts of the business, so it's not all about treasurer to treasurer, and indeed talking to the board and painting that big story to them about how they've set the strategic agenda, but how we can move the financial agenda alongside it. So I think it's absolutely fundamental, and it's actually the exciting part of the job. Although I'm a mathematician, I love the techie stuff as well, but it's not the part that fills my day these days.
Well, it's a great combination, isn't it, having those two skill sets? And it's fascinating. You say some people are maybe have a more of a natural talent in those skills, and other people it's more hard work. But what I know is from my training, we talked about music earlier, very briefly, but as a musician, it's all about practice, and it's a shame that some people feel blocked because they think that they won't ever be able to kind of effectively strategically influence others, that's just not their thing. Well, they can, because it's just practice, it's just familiarity. It's like anything else. When you start out, you can't play the flute, and you can't make a noise, and then
absolutely. I think you can learn. I mean, some people have been more natural than others, but you can learn it, and you should put the time in to learn this stuff, because it will be what makes a difference. When I recruit a senior treasurer, I'm often not bothered at all whether they cover the technical area that I'm asking. I might be looking for a corporate finance person, and I can think the last 2 corporate finance people I recruited going back a number of years, they hadn't done corporate finance. They were actually cash and banking people. But the reason I brought them in was because I loved their storytelling I loved that part of their makeup, and therefore that was a very, you know, it was easy for me to say, well, we're going to deal with that technical bit.
Yeah.
But you're going to help me deliver this big picture messaging, and that's really key. Indeed,
and I love that. You know, you keep mentioning storytelling, and it's just so true that if trying to understand the person you're speaking to, if they're a different personality type, if you're not telling a story, if you're not telling something that engages them, you might as well, you could be as brilliant as you like technically, but it doesn't really matter. Claudia, moving to you for your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think at the senior level, it's like the book, like what got you here won't get you there. So the technical skills, they give you the confidence perhaps to be in such a role, but that's not enough. So a treasurer, most of the time, they are selling the function, selling themselves, selling their ideas. So they need curiosity and creativity to come up with these new projects. They need to understand what the management wants. So how to work with the CFO that is not really interested perhaps in technology or investing in treasury, and rather would give everything to the actual business. So you need to manage the stakeholders. You need to manage the agendas of everybody else, understand it, and create a strong business case. So you need business acumen. You need to understand what drives the whole company, and how whatever you want to do would work towards the company strategy. So I really think that at the treasurer level, you need to be a salesperson. You need negotiation skills, presentation skills. So, but among all, you need a lot of resilience, and resilience is it's very difficult to train, because you need to fail several times to know that you can try again, at that nothing happened when you failed, or if you fail. So as Neil pointed out earlier, so treasurers need to be risk takers. So it's not easy to ask for a big investment for a TMS system. So your skin is on it, but you need to believe in a vision and make this vision through storytelling contagious.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to open up now to the audience. If you'd like to ask any questions, please put them in the chat box. I think there's a slight delay, so I'll just pause a moment to see if anything's coming in. Sorry, I've got an itching condition to carry out, and it sometimes gets my throat, and it's just picked this moment to do so. So help me out, audience, with some questions. I don't see anything coming in yet.
Caroline, just while maybe the audience, you know, think of something to ask. There's a couple of things that we've talked about, and I think are worth kind of dwelling on a bit. I think Claudia mentioned it well when we were talking about shared services. I do think organisations, we are going to move to this virtual shared services, virtual organisation positions now. I'm much more on the hunt for the right people wherever they are in the world. So we will start to see a new generation of organizational design, really enabled by the kind of tools we're on today and the experiences we've had over the last 24 months. So I think that's very, very important for people to be very flexible in their thinking, whether it's on a macro scale or a micro scale. So if you've got 4 or 5 locations in the world, you can still create a centralized team, but it can be a virtual centralized team. It doesn't have to be in one location anymore. It's very, very powerful.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a brilliant point, and it does so many things. And it's fascinating how it's taken COVID for many people to realise that you can work from anywhere. I've worked with people in the past, and I've had virtual teams around the world, and my colleagues have been dead against it, saying, we have to have them in the same place and so on. And COVID has really helped to accelerate that trend, which helps diversity and inclusion, doesn't it? It gives people a bit of flexibility around their working, but you can get the absolute best people. You can get diverse thinking, which is shown to produce better results. So it's a kind of win-win. And there's been a few other things that I think have been accelerated for Treasury through COVID, which were perhaps unexpected even. So I think the focus on ESG, what I thought at the beginning, well, people are going to see that as a nice to have. There's a lot of greenwashing. There's a bit of stuff going on, but not a lot. So with people being busy focused on COVID, it would kind of fizzle out. And yet it really did seem to accelerate. Having said that, we've just had COP26, and I think a lot of people come out of it slightly disappointed with or what came out. They thought more would be agreed. But I don't know if either of you have thoughts about COVID and the further impact. The other thing we've observed as well, and that some of our research has shown some kind of unprompted comments from people, is trust has been built. People feel like they trust their teams more, and they feel more trusted by their bosses. Because you have to look at the outputs rather than the inputs. And they've also talked about that opportunity as well to be able to strategically influence and to talk to your CFO and your chief executive on a regular basis, because they've suddenly become very interested, or they did suddenly become very interested in cash and liquidity. But maybe just Paul and Neil and then Claudia, or whichever way you'd like to play it. Any comments of what you found, surprises through COVID? Developments, anything of note?
So maybe going back to Neil's comment on the shared service center. So reading through some articles, and this is an opportunity, but also maybe a threat for the shared service center setup. They need to upskill to become relevant, to remain relevant. If you are thinking about offshoring, now companies don't only offshore to other geographies far away, they can also offshore to Scotland or to the Alps, right? So some people now, they moved there for COVID and they want to stay there. They don't have any intentions to go back to the big hubs. So the challenge there is maybe cybersecurity, how you keep control, and the trust you were talking about, Caroline. So it would be interesting to know how it goes in terms of ESG, because the S, we forget that it still stands for social, right? So maybe it is about maybe companies start asking for loans on an ESG basis to improve this type of setups and increasing diversity that way. So there are many companies that weren't used to work from home and never thought about it. We met some people that they never came back to the office. They weren't working because they didn't feel good working from home. So it is also retraining and different skills that are asked, because the communication over chats is not the same as face to face. So I think it will be a journey, and we will be talking about it for years.
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of that. I do think, going back to the trust point, I think there's a lot of trust built on outputs during COVID. I mean, we've delivered, and I think that's true of a lot of people across the market. So we've delivered, and that gives a lot of trust with senior management. I think the one thing we're grappling with now is how to inject and maintain innovation into the conversations, which is much more difficult, I think, over these type of platforms. So that's certainly a challenge I'm grappling with. ESG is interesting. I think we're, putting COP26 aside, we are at a pivotal point in terms of the whole form of sustainable finance. I mean, I was having a debate the other day, in terms of the way it was worded, and somebody was presenting to me and they said, oh, sustainable finance. And I said, oh, so that's the CFO's problem, is it? And then the next slide, they had sustainable financing. And I said, oh, so that's my problem, is it? And the person was a little bit taken aback. And I said, well, I think these are markers, these are badges which are wrong. It's sustainable business, and we need to make this a whole company from the CEO down, or the chairman down, indeed. So it's not just about finance, it's about the whole business. So I find it fascinating. I think it's an area that we should all engage in. If I do any more education, I'll probably go and do sustainable leadership at Cambridge or something. That would get me out of bed. So I think this is a real interesting area. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Neil. Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd like to do that too. And we have got a question coming now from Nazreen. Very insightful conversation. Thank you. Question: in this new environment, have things changed on how operations side of Treasury is managed? Any tips, best practices you could share to enhance collaboration and transparency?
Shall I kick off just briefly? I think I was saying this earlier. For me, it's about information. So if you're all coming from the same information, you can set the KPIs. What are you focused on? Are you looking at, your forecast accuracy or your freestanding derivative values? Are you setting limits on that at which people can go in and triage to make sure it's happening? Or is it the speed of hedging or the amount of cash that's getting to the center daily, and where are the trapped parts of the cash balances? So I think it's having a really clear shared agenda driven off good quality shared data. So if you don't have data and you don't have the shared objectives, then you're going to have people working in silos, chipping away at what they think is important. But if you've got the same data, you give them an empowered position to act against a series of clear objectives, and you just follow up on those objectives, then I think you get a great outcome. So we follow up. Our teams in operations do daily huddles. What do they want to clear today? What's their focus, so they don't get distracted? And then once a month, I'm kind of looking at the whole picture across the department. So I think it's pretty simple, really, but you have to do it.
And maybe from so I authored one of the articles on the guide about called data-driven treasury. So I think to have transparency, it is much easier if you have the data and you are talking about the same data with everyone. So for that, of course, you require an investment in technology. So Neil shared that he is lucky enough to have a single SAP instance. So the record among my clients is 170 ERPs and 70 MS. So bringing all this data together for such a company, it will be very difficult and maybe too expensive. So again, the new goal is data, and to achieve all these. Sorry, my son just came into the room.
I thought so. They're always distracted, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So to achieve all these efficiencies, we need data analytics tools. We need to bring the highest amount of data together, and have the tools that allow you to achieve this. And it doesn't need to be very expensive. You can also start with a Tableau table instead of Excel, and get a good analyst who can customize it for you. So I'm sorry, I need to stop.
Very good. Well, thank you. It's getting very late at your time over in Singapore. I'll just check if there are any last questions from our audience before I might ask a final one for you, from you both, before we close and give people a comfort break, because we never get the little breaks between meetings in this new world. So maybe my final question, I think Claudia definitely had to go now.
I'm sorry.
So, and this, my final question is going to be about this whole thing about us working from home and the whole different culture, because we do get to know each other better. We know our kids. We know my cat was meowing earlier on to the amusement of my team, and or you get the doorbell ringing for your Amazon delivery, and I must stop that, thinking about the environment. I'm trying to control my Amazon buying at the moment, but yeah, just in our ways of working and so on. Just very briefly from both of you, do you see that we touched on it earlier, but just specifically, so you yourself, Neil, for instance, you and your Treasury team, you said you'd be global and so on, but you yourself personally, do you think you will be traveling to the office and ever, a few times? What will it be for, and how are you going to deal with newer treasurers coming into the team, young treasurers who need training and so on? Because you did reference there are some conversations and innovative conversations that should be had when you're together, but I think it also applies when young members of the team, new members of the team do come in, and because people express that often as a concern. So maybe just a few comments on those from yourself, and then move over to Claudia before we finish.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Look, we're all at different life stages, aren't we? So some of us love working from home, other people really don't like it. I know my team in Romania, who are generally younger city dwellers, they don't like it. They want to be in the office. So finding the right balance, I think, is key, and I think it has to come from a mixture of what works, but also what's flexible for the company, but also for the individual. So I will go into the office. I mean, I am now. I'm kind of 50% in the office. You'll find me there on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that is deliberate. That's deliberately to bring the teams back together, at least for some of the time, to knit the team, to have not just to cram all the meetings in on those days, because what I saw was a behaviour of people feeling, oh, well, I've got to have all the meetings on a Tuesday and Thursdays. No, it was supposed to be about engaging with each other around innovation, training, coaching, more kind of team building, rather than replacing Teams meetings or Zoom meetings, which we could have had on other days. So yes, there will be a physical, presence in the office. Will it be 5 days a week? I doubt that I will go back to that. But I think, notwithstanding whether if I would prefer to be out of the office, my job is to train, to coach, to develop, and therefore I have to be in the office. I think the more difficult one is, international travel. So I equally have to go to the Romanian team and coach them and work with them and give them visibility. And with the different regulations, that's been even more tricky than getting in and out of London. But that will come, and it's important, I think.
Thank you, Neil. Claudia, any observations?
Yeah, so I think I don't believe that the travel will go back, at least for me, to the levels before COVID. So how we usually work is that we would go to a geography and then invite a lot of clients and say, this person is coming, please have a meeting. And what we discovered now is that there is a lot of expertise around the world in the bank. And at any point in time, we can just pull them into a Zoom conversation. and it is more enriching than waiting for somebody just to come and have it with 3 people. So there are lots of advantages to achieve having the right people in the room. In terms of Singapore, so we are in a very privileged place. We didn't have a high number, so for a long time we were able to go to the office on a regular basis if we wanted to. But I don't think that everybody wants to go back on 100% basis. So I saw some of my colleagues lost lots of pounds because they were exercising instead of commuting. So I think people are now valuing, many people are valuing working from home. So we would need to manage all types of personalities.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, time will tell. It's going to be interesting whether we go back to old patterns, we form entirely new ones, or something in between. We're coming to the end of our allotted time, though, so I'd like to thank you both very much, Neil, Claudia, for joining me today twice, for our kind of launch of the ACT's International Treasury Peer Review. Thanks again to Deutsche Bank for their support of the whole project. Do have a look at the guide, everyone, and I hope you will enjoy your personalised report when you get that, if you took part in the peer review. So thanks once again for joining us today. I see a couple of thanks in there, so thank you very much for joining us, our audience, and I wish you all the best, whatever time of day you are. Hope you get a good night's sleep, Claudia, because it's very late over there, yes, take care everyone, and hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Goodbye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.